this is Dr. Fong, and today I am talking about why we are seeing so many babies with eczema. And today we are going to talk about the first reason, which is microbiome imbalances. And this is a really big topic because 20% of our babies are being born with eczema. I'm seeing this as such a prevalent issue in our little ones these days, and the microbiome is one of the big reasons that we have to blame for this. And we will be talking later this week. I'll be doing another live about other root causes, including toxicity, environmental toxicity, even food toxicity. But today we are talking mainly about the microbiome. And the microbiome, what is that? Well, I want you guys to think of it as your army against the world. And we have bacteria that we have in our system, and this is our microbiome, and this really makes up our army in terms of protecting us from the outside world. And there's a couple of problems that happen with our babies which cause them to have microbiome imbalances. First of all, the microbiome of a baby really comes from mom, is really a big place that we're going to get our microbiome health. So if mom didn't really have a strong microbiome, or if mom took antibiotics during pregnancy or took antibiotics during labor, this could be a big problem that we may need to pay attention to. Microbiome imbalances could also not just be those imbalances that occur from things like antibiotics, but also maybe mom was not eating a diet rich in good bacteria, prebiotic foods, that kind of thing. And therefore that leaves baby when born being with, having a poor microbiome. And again, our microbiome is that army that we have. The other way that mom might transfer the microbiome to baby is actually via breast milk. And so if mom isn't doing breastfeeding, that could be another way that baby doesn't have a good microbiome. But you could, if you are formula feeding, do things like probiotics. A baby can actually take probiotics if mom is not breastfeeding. If mom is breastfeeding, mom can take probiotics, but even still, if mom had like any antibiotic use or anything like that, baby could also take probiotics as well too. And you do want to make sure to consult with a naturopathic doctor or an integrative doctor before doing these things, but these are some things you want to think about. The other thing is when babies are born via C-section, unfortunately, they are not getting the microbiome from mom that a baby would if they were delivered vaginally. So when I am seeing a baby with eczema, these are some of the first questions I ask. And oftentimes I will see that some of these babies are C-section babies. Maybe mom had to take antibiotics. Maybe mom herself has a microbiome imbalance, and we can see a lot of gut dysfunction in mom as well too. The other thing that we might have a problem with is environmental exposure, which actually causes us to have microbiome imbalances, like mold, for example, is a really big one that I see in my patients. And I'll actually see this a lot in babies. And oftentimes I will actually see a lot of hypopigmentation on the skin, meaning like there are patches of kind of discolored, and it would be lighter skin that you might see. And then you'll see kind of the more inflamed skin on top of that. And when I do see that, I often ask the question, okay, is there yeast, fungus, molds that this baby is overgrowing in their system? And that's always a possibility. And that could be from the environment itself. So you want to look at the environment. I do often find a lot of mold in my patients, the babies with eczema, and we'll see that, the mold can be in the home. You may want to look under your bed. You may want to look at your windowsills. You may want to just kind of look into this in your home. And if you go to our product recommendations page, which is cleanbody.health/products, you'll also see that we have different test kits that you can do to check your home. One that I really like is called Immunolytics, and that one you could, very inexpensive way of checking mold in your home. And then if that is positive, then you may want to do a little bit more deeper research and actually hire someone to check for the mold in your home. Mold can also be something mom was exposed to, a long time ago, and it's actually just something she has in her system. So that's a possibility too. It may not actually be in your current situation, in your current environment, but it actually could just be something that you were exposed to in the past. So as you can see, mom's health is very, very important in terms of determining what baby's health might be. So prenatally, I do recommend making sure to do a detox before you get pregnant if possible. And if you're having symptoms, try to clean up the system and get rid of those symptoms before you have a baby. That's one thing to think about. Making sure that the environment is really clean when you are pregnant as well too. And, making sure that you're kind of paying attention to your own microbiome and your own gut health when you're pregnant and even beyond, especially if you're breastfeeding. Because all of these things affect babies' health and can contribute to baby eczema. So whenever I am treating someone with baby eczema, the other thing I'm going to want to know is I need to know all about mom's health. This is really important because mom's health is really kind of equivalent sometimes to baby's health. So that's really important. I did write an article in NDNR that was called, toxin transfer from mom to baby. So how are we transferring those toxins? Well, number one, we are transferring them in the womb in terms of via the placenta. And then the other way we are transferring those toxins is via our breast milk as well too. So those are two ways we can directly transfer those toxins. And then as I mentioned, the way the baby was born can also affect their microbiome. The other thing we might want to think about is whether mom actually carries parasites. So how do we get parasites? Well, there's lots of ways. If you've ever traveled to Mexico or a place that doesn't have as sanitary conditions in terms of the water, mom may have been exposed to parasites, and that is another thing that mom can transfer over. There also could be, parasites if you like to eat sushi, if you like to eat raw food. That's another way that I have seen people get things like parasitic worms and other types of parasites. So that's another thing that sometimes we need to look into for our little ones. Bacterial overgrowth is another one, especially if you've taken antibiotics or if baby took antibiotics. I'll often see this in kids. So when I see them and they're kids, I'll ask, okay, has the child ever taken any antibiotics? And the answer, oh yes, we had strep throat and we took, antibiotics several times for multiple bouts of strep throat. And then all of a sudden you see that's when eczema started. So that's another possibility in terms of just kind of looking at the antibiotic usage for the child, not just mom. We were earlier talking about mom. Now we're talking about baby actually using antibiotics. So if you do have to use antibiotics, I highly recommend using some probiotics afterwards. Working with someone to make sure you're taking the right type of probiotics is important. And if you are working with a natural doctor, naturopathic or integrative doctor, we normally will try to boost the immune function first before ever doing antibiotics, just to kind of get the immune function to be able to work and kind of, do what it's supposed to do, which is eradicate that infection. And within 1 or 3 days, if that infection is still present and the patient still has a fever and all that, then, we want to consider antibiotics. But, we could also support the immune system to do the job. And of course, working with someone is very important in, someone who really understands how to boost the immune function. So these are proactive measures so that, if you are pregnant, you're not taking antibiotics. If you have a little one, you're not giving that little one antibiotics, just as kind of like the first line of defense. And I often think that that's kind of the first line of defense. And sometimes we need to think about, what can we do to be proactive about the microbiome, about the health, etc. In the nutrition, we should really think about, improving probiotics, prebiotics. So that would be things like fermented, cabbage and probiotic foods like yogurts and things like that. And that's important. Kombucha, etc., in terms of getting those really good bacterial levels up. Okay. So that is all about the microbiome. I would love to open it up to any questions. If anybody has any questions about baby eczema, about the microbiome, what is the microbiome and what happens here? Now, oftentimes when the microbiome is involved, I often see certain types of presentations of eczema as well too. And one thing that I like to say is I sometimes see like a mapping situation going on. And I like to call it mapping, where you kind of see like almost like a red map on the skin. And oftentimes I notice that really is related to microbiome imbalances, is when you see this kind of mapping situation. Oftentimes you might see that a lot of times in the armpit area, the groin area. And these are kind of the places that are dark and sweaty. And, things like yeast and fungus and bacteria love to grow in these areas. And so you might kind of see a mapping that goes in this area, okay, or like on the side of the body here. And so if you see that, you may want to think, okay, we need to think about the microbiome. Now, what are some symptoms that are related to the microbiome imbalances? So not only the eczema is one of those alarm systems, but there are other alarm systems too that can be kind of, going off. So one thing you may want to look at is the tongue, and you may see that the tongue has a nice white coat on it. And if it has the white coat, or you feel like every morning you have to kind of like brush the tongue, and it has that white coat, then that's something to kind of think about in terms of, okay, this could be a microbiome imbalance type of symptom, because that coat could really be, bacteria and other types of yeast, fungus, etc., kind of growing on the tongue. The other thing is if you get bloated. So if you get bloated a lot, that's another kind of, okay, you probably have a microbiome imbalance. And let's say you get bloated, especially after you eat sugary things, or maybe the person's really craving sugary foods and sweet foods. That could also just mean that, okay, if you're craving those things, it's really those bugs that might be craving those things and making you want to eat those foods and eat it ravenously. And sometimes people with microbiome imbalances, babies and children, like they're ravenously hungry and it feels like they never get full. That's another sign. Also, if somebody is kind of having a lot of gas coming out of them, whether it be gas in one direction or the other direction, and that could also mean a microbiome imbalance as well. Or if the person is just having body odors in general. Those body odors are often released because there are microbiome imbalances and there are bacteria that are kind of growing in the system and actually releasing those smells. And so any kind of body odor is typically due to some kind of microbiome imbalance. So if someone has BO, or if someone is kind of tooting a lot or burping a lot and there's a smell that comes with that, that's also a sign of microbiome imbalance. Okay, so we're all gonna kind of toot a little bit, but if the tooting is a little too much, then it could be a sign of microbiome imbalance. Okay, so what do we do with how do we figure out what this microbiome imbalance is? Well, testing can really, really help us. So we can do things like poop tests, and you collect the poop, and you collect the poop for anywhere from 1 to 3 days. You send it to the lab. When you do those poop tests, you need to make sure that you're not taking any kind of antibiotics or probiotics, because we are checking for good bacteria. We're checking for bad bacteria. We're also checking for yeast. We're checking for parasites. We're checking for anything that could be growing in the system, but both good and bad. So oftentimes when you see your conventional doctor, you might be kind of only really searching for certain bad bugs like C. difficile or H. pylori, we try to not only look at the bad bugs, but also look at the good bugs as well too, because also if you don't have enough lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, some good bacteria, then you just don't have the right army, right, to protect yourself. So testing is really, really helpful. Then, what would we do when we find microbiome imbalance? Well, first, we have to do what we call, it's a 4R program. So the first R is remove, and we have to remove any offenders to the system, which would be, a big part of that is food, because food is something you intake 3 to 5 times a day. Now, today we're specifically talking about babies. So for babies, we might want to look at, if mom's breastfeeding, we might want to look at what mom is eating, because that could be causing some inflammation in the system. If mom is eating allergens like gluten and dairy and things like that. That's number one. We may also want to think about what baby is consuming, if baby is consuming a formula, what kind of formula is baby consuming? Is that a dairy formula? Is it organic? Is it soy-based? Is it goat's milk? And that may also be causing a little irritation and inflammation in the gut. So that's number one. And we may need to remove the offenders on the system. Number two is replace. And replace is, we want to think about anything that needs to be replaced. Anything from nutrients that maybe need to be supplemented to digestive enzymes. Maybe the digestive process isn't going well, to bioacids. All of these are possibilities for things we may want to replace to help the digestive function kind of work better. And then number three is repair. So what happens when there's been a lot of inflammation in the gut lining for a long period of time because the microbiome is imbalanced, we're eating SAD diets, which is a standard American diet, then we get what we call leaky gut. And this is a term in kind of the naturopathic world, where if there's a lot of inflammation in the gut, the cells in the gut will get a little bit leaky. And so as they get leaky, now you're going to have things leaking through the gut lining, such as toxins, microbes, etc., even foods like food particles that aren't supposed to be leaking through because they shouldn't be able to fit through those leaky, the leaky gut places, and they are leaking through. This can cause more inflammation in the system, so that's called leaky gut. So we may need to use things, herbs and other things to just kind of help heal the gut lining. And for babies, we need to be a little bit particular about this, right? Because how are we going to give the babies these herbs? And so sometimes we're just doing really small drops of homeopathy. Sometimes we're doing powders that are herbal, but just really small doses for our little ones because we can't do too much here. And oftentimes what I love is that we don't have to do too much when it comes to little babies because they're so tiny, and we really just need to kind of urge the system in the right direction. And the baby system wants to heal, it wants to be in balance, and unfortunately it's often kind of the burdens of today's world that are actually causing the baby to kind of be off. So we just want to put the baby back on track, and so often we don't have to do too much. So restoring the system typically means kind of restoring that gut lining. Repairing this gut lining. The last R is restore. So restore is finally where we actually restore the gut microbiome, where we do probiotics, prebiotics, that kind of thing. And I think one of the problems is, probiotics is something that's really out there now for eczema. I think a lot of people know about that. They maybe have tried it. And some people might say, oh, I did probiotics, it didn't work. And the problem is that's number 4 on our list. That's not number 1, that's number 4 on our list. So we have to do 1 through 3. We can't just jump to 4, right? So we have to do 1 through 3. And I think people are just jumping to 4. Some people are just taking out dairy and taking out gluten, and they think that can fix the problem. That's also problematic because that's not doing all the 4 parts either. That's really just doing part 1. So we need to kind of do all 4 parts. We need to do a good evaluation to understand what we need to do in those 4 parts. It's different for everybody. That's another thing that we really need to pay attention to, is there really isn't a one size fits all for this. There really has to be, let's analyze the system, let's do some tests, let's figure it out, and then let's kind of do what we need to do for that. Okay, so that's the process, and even for babies, this is what we need to do. And again, as I spoke about earlier, is that if you have a baby with eczema, you want to really think about mom and what mom's health is looking like or looked like during pregnancy. And if breastfeeding, what does it look like now is another question to think about. Okay, I would like to open it up to any questions. We are talking about baby eczema. Reason number 1, microbiome imbalances. So that's what we were talking about. If you guys have any questions about that, I will be doing another IG Live. I'm going to be doing IG Lives about eczema all month. This week, we're primarily talking about babies. Next week, we're going to move on to kids. Then we're going to move on to young adults and then adults. So week by week, we're just going to kind of break it down. Someone is saying my pediatrician doesn't recommend probiotics for a 4-month-old. He says it does more harm than good. What are your thoughts? So it's really hard if I don't know the history to really answer this appropriately. I don't know why your pediatrician is saying that. Sometimes if there is like a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort, sometimes we don't like to use probiotics, and we may want, that's restore. That's number 4. Sometimes we want to do steps 1, 2, and 3 before we ever give probiotics. So that's one thing I can think of as to why we wouldn't want to give probiotics. What I sometimes think is sometimes conventional doctors, pediatricians, they're just not taught this stuff. So they don't really kind of know how to use probiotics, or they don't know how to use herbs. And so they might just say, oh, it's unsafe, and I think that, we have to kind of individualize this towards everyone. And I wouldn't say that in general that a 4-month shouldn't be taking probiotics, but I do think you need somebody who's really knowledgeable to make sure that you're giving your baby the right probiotics. That's what I would say, and that it's the right time to give the probiotics, because as I said, it's a 4-step process. We want to do 1, 2, 3, and then 4, which is probiotics. Okay. All right. And if you have any other questions, please type into the chat box. I think someone else had a question about where are we selling our products. So yeah, what we do at my practice is we have a program, and it's basically it's called Clean Start, and it's a lot of different things. It's an educational program, but it's also visits with me and my team. My team includes nutritionists, and so you'll have visits with me and my team, and then we basically analyze. We do testing. We analyze your situation. We evaluate. One of the things we evaluate is the microbiome, especially in eczema case. There's going to be microbiome imbalances for a lot of eczema people. I would say almost all eczema people. We're going to see some microbiome imbalances, but everyone's microbiome balances are going to be different. So some people will have mold and fungus and yeast, and some people will have bacteria, parasites, and some people just have a bacterial imbalance and they don't have any infections. So everybody's a little bit different. So the testing is important. And then the education piece is really important, because it's not just about taking supplements in order to bring your microbiome back to balance. We have to do a lot of different things to get the microbiome back in balance, from nutrition to even stress management, exercise, etc. And for a baby, a lot of that does have to potentially even do with mom, if mom is still breastfeeding especially. So there's a lot of education that we need to give. So our program is called Clean Start. If you're interested in learning more, there's a couple of things. So we have an assessment that you can do, and we have a master class tomorrow evening. You can get all of those on the link in my bio, and so you can just click. And the first one is the master class. In the master class, I'll be teaching more about this. So tonight we're only talking about microbiome. I'll be talking more about all of the other reasons that we need to think about when we have someone with eczema. And we're going to also break this out over the next couple of weeks in terms of all of the different reasons. Again, this week we're starting with babies because I really think this is a big problem. 20% of our babies coming out with eczema, that is a big number. That is a lot of babies who have eczema. And what I really think is our babies are screaming out that their bodies are imbalanced. And a lot of it has to do with today's world. It has to do with the toxicities, the medications we're using, and how we're kind of really causing imbalance in our systems, and that's transferring on to our babies. Okay. If you are interested, you can also meet me individually. You can book a discovery consultation. And from this IG Live, I am giving a discount. If you guys want to get 40% off the discovery consultation, you can use the code eczema9, and just eczema is in all caps and then 9. That does expire tonight at midnight. And today is Monday, October 9th. So it expires tonight at midnight. So if you did want to meet me personally, that's another way that you can get assessed, get evaluated if you have a baby with eczema. One thing we'll do is really understand why in that discovery consultation. So I'll ask you all about your story. You can upload photos. I like to see a lot of photos. I like to see pictures of skin, poop. I like to see food. There's a lot we need to gather to really understand what's the root cause. But the microbiome imbalances, that is one of the biggest root causes. So that's why I wanted to start here. Okay. And if you just want to learn more, I would say check out my masterclass tomorrow. It's at 6 p.m. and you can sign up for that. And if you kind of just want to know what imbalances, like what organs are imbalanced in your body, we also have a free assessment that you can do. You can you basically answer a bunch of questions and you can see which organs are imbalanced for you. If the mom has leaky gut, does the baby get the effects too if they are still breastfeeding? Will the baby get leaky gut too? This is a great question. And my answer to this is there is a possibility because, well, the question is, why did mom have leaky gut in the first place? And if mom had leaky gut because of microbiome imbalances, maybe mom took antibiotics and then that led to microbiome imbalance, which led to leaky gut, there is a possibility that baby also could have microbiome imbalances, which could also lead to leaky gut. Then if mom is eating foods like allergenic foods like gluten and dairy and eggs that baby is potentially having reactions to, then if mom is breastfeeding and eating those foods, which might be causing her leaky gut, it also could cause baby to have leaky gut too. So that's a possibility. But if mom is breastfeeding, we do definitely have to think about mom's health, and that's something to think about. There are tests where you could test the toxicity of the breast milk. You can see this in our product recommendations page. It's on cleanbody.health/products. If you go to testing, there's actually a test kit where you can actually check the health of your breast milk. So that's something I sometimes consider if a mom might have toxicity like mercury or lead that's coming out into the breast milk. Or maybe if we want to just check what the nutrition of the breast milk looks like, and maybe mom isn't doing enough in terms of vitamins, minerals, and even probiotics. Okay. Is there a link between what breastfeeding moms eat leading to your baby have eczema? Yes, I would say this is an absolute possibility. So if your microbiome isn't great and you're not eating a very probiotic, prebiotic rich diet, you're not transferring that great microbiome to baby, right? That's number one. But as I just mentioned, if you're eating allergenic foods, there is a possibility that baby is actually having exposure to that through you and having issues. So I would recommend just trying to do an elimination diet and seeing, if that helps. Of course, you do want to consult with your physician before doing anything. So this is not medical advice. This is more educational advice today. And again, you can book a discovery consultation with me if you would like to kind of be assessed individually. And again, I am giving a 40% discount for today's IG Live. It does expire tonight at midnight, and you'll you'll use Eczema 9. You can go to the link in my bio and just click book a consultation. And when you book it, just make sure to put Eczema 9, eczema in all caps, and then 9, and you'll get 40% off the discovery consultation, okay? If you just kind of want to learn more, I would recommend you come to my free masterclass tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's also on the link in my bio. And lastly, maybe you just want to do an assessment and kind of learn about your health and learn about your organs and what organs are in balance and what that all means. You can do our assessment, which is also in the link in my bio, okay? Great. And so I would like to open it up to any other questions anyone has. We are specifically talking about baby eczema today. So if you have any questions about baby eczema, please go ahead and type them into the comments here. And I'm happy to answer any and everything about baby eczema because this is a huge problem, unfortunately. Our babies are coming out with eczema and we're all confused by it. And, you know, I have some posts out there and a lot of people tend to get a little angry about it. Like, well, how does my baby have this toxicity? And how does my baby have a gut dysfunction? And, you know, and the unfortunate thing, it's not baby's fault. It's not even mom's fault. You know, it is unfortunately part of our world. Our world is just toxic. The medications we use are toxic to us. Sometimes we need to use them, but sometimes, you know, like if we use antibiotics, it wipes out our good bacteria. And sometimes, you know, where we're getting these chronic issues is because we are leaning on medications and things like that in terms of really you know, using those things instead of helping the body to do the job, which is what we prefer as naturopathic doctors. Let's help the body to do the job. What's the best method to clear up their eczema if they aren't even having solid foods yet? So Autumn, you may have, or Autumn Flower, you may have missed the beginning of this live. I would recommend you watch the replay. We are talking today about microbiome imbalances. And so first we need to, step one in my process is always evaluate. We have to evaluate what is actually happening. Everybody with eczema has a different reason. Today, we're talking about one of those reasons, which is microbiome imbalance. Now, is that true for everybody? Well, for eczema, I would say microbiome imbalances are pretty much almost across the board. That's one of the reasons most people have eczema. But there's a possibility that there's a person who this reason might not really fit them. And we're going to talk later this week about other reasons like toxicity and other reasons beyond that in the coming weeks, since it's Eczema Awareness Month. So I want to do as much education as possible. So the best method to clear up the eczema, it really depends on the reason the eczema is happening. So because we're talking about microbiome imbalances today, the microbiome imbalance way of clearing up the eczema, as I mentioned, and go ahead and watch the beginning of this live, is the 4-step program, the 4R program, where we remove, replace, repair, restore. That's really the best method, is really stepping through and cleaning up the gut, restoring the gut function. And if they're not eating solid foods, for this mom, I don't know if they're breastfeeding or drinking formula. Those are things we want to think about. And we also talked earlier about how mom's health is so important if mom is breastfeeding. Okay. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Again, if you want to learn more, you can watch my masterclass tomorrow. It's free and it's live. I'll be answering more questions, but I'll be showing more slides, and we'll get into more, not just microbiome imbalances, but we'll get into more in terms of what are the other causes of eczema, and we'll get into that. So you can click the link in my bio and then click the first link, which is the masterclass. You also can do the assessment, which assesses all of your organ systems to just kind of see how imbalanced they are, and that's a really big part. When your organs are imbalanced, the system will scream out with symptoms, and eczema is one of those symptoms. And lastly, if you want to get assessed for microbiome imbalances and other imbalances, you can book a discovery consultation with me, and we are giving 40% off for today's IG Live. So you can use the code Eczema9. Eczema is in all caps. It does expire tonight at midnight. Tonight is October 9th, Monday, and you'll click the link in my bio and click book consultation, and then you'll get that discount, okay? I look forward to maybe seeing some of you at my masterclass, maybe seeing some of you at a discovery consultation. I hope today was beneficial for you, and I am going to be doing this all month. It is Eczema Awareness Month. I think there isn't enough awareness about treating the root cause of eczema. And that is what I'm going to be going through all month, because I think that is where we need to focus. We need to hone in on the root cause of eczema, not just silencing with medications, but getting to the root. And this is reason number 1. We're starting with babies this week. We're going on to kids next week. Then we're going to do young adults and then adults, okay? And one person's asking, does rarely defecate is the symptoms of leaky gut? Rarely, for like every 3 days. That is not necessarily a symptom of leaky gut. You are having constipation, but when you are constipated, you likely also have leaky gut, but it's not, leaky gut doesn't cause constipation necessarily, but they usually kind of can come together. So, and constipation, that is that is a sign that the microbiome is one of the signs that the microbiome is really imbalanced, but there's so many other reasons that you could be having constipation. So again, that would be different for everybody. And that is a IG Live in itself, is just talking about constipation, but a lot of eczema people have constipation issues, and I like to say that's like you are not releasing the toxins out, and instead those toxins are just coming out through your skin because they're not getting out the right direction. Okay? All right, guys, have a great Monday, and I will see you later this week. We're going to be talking about baby eczema again, but we're going to move into toxicity and how environmental toxins, even food toxins, can be one of the root causes of baby eczema. All right? Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.